You will give me an heir, not conversation. The Duke of Hawkridge said it before 6 candles, 4 guests, 12 servants, and the wife who had spent the entire afternoon trying to save 3 families from losing their cattle before winter. No one moved. Even the silver covers on the dining table seemed to hold the room still. Rosamund Ellery, Duchess of Hawkridge, looked at her husband from the far end of the table and understood that the cruelty was not in his volume. Alistair had spoken quietly. That made it worse. The words had not escaped him. He had chosen them. It was the evening of September 30th, 1816, one day after Michaelmas, and rain pressed against the tall windows of Alderwick Hall in Hampshire. The estate had spent the previous day collecting rents, hearing complaints, and pretending that every household beneath the Hawkridge name was secure. Rosamund knew better. 3 tenant families near St. Anne's had been ordered to move their cattle from the southern pasture before the end of the week. The northern field shown on the estate map was marked as dry ground. In truth, its drainage ditch had collapsed, leaving the grass sodden and dangerous for winter grazing. If the cattle were sold, the families would lose milk, income, and breeding stock. By spring, they would owe more than they could repay. Rosamund had tried to explain this before dinner. Alistair had postponed her twice. She had tried again after the soup was removed. Lord Lionel Harcourt had smiled across the table and said the matter was precisely why estate management should remain with men accustomed to unpleasant decisions. The southern boundary was opened only for summer use. Lionel said, "If exceptions are made now, every tenant will claim hardship." "This is not an exception," Rosamund replied. "The map is wrong." Lady Clarissa Harcourt turned her wineglass by the stem. For years, before Alistair's marriage, Clarissa had arranged Alderwick's dinners, committees, charitable visits, and county invitations. She had never possessed a title in the house, but she had enjoyed the influence of one. "Maps are rarely wrong," she said. "People often are." Rosamund met her gaze. Mr. Vane inspected the northern field this morning. The steward stood behind Lionel's chair, his expression carefully blank. "The ditch has failed, Your Grace," he confirmed. "Nearly 40 yards of the field are under standing water." Alistair's hand tightened around his knife. A year earlier, a dispute over grazing rights had brought angry tenants to Alderwick's gates. No one had been injured, but the humiliation had travelled through Hampshire. Lionel had stood beside Alistair, then advised firmness, reorganized collections, and helped restore the appearance of control. Since that autumn, Alistair had trusted Lionel whenever disorder threatened. Lionel knew it. "The estate cannot be governed by every hardship brought to the dinner table," he said. "Nor can a dukedom survive if its master appears uncertain." His eyes moved toward Rosamund with polished courtesy. "Continuity is what Hawkridge needs now. Stability. An heir." Clarissa lowered her lashes as though the last word had not been intended as a weapon. Rosamund had been married 4 months. Society had already begun counting. Alistair looked at her, and for one brief moment she saw exhaustion rather than coldness. She had hoped, during the first weeks of their marriage, that exhaustion might become honesty if met with patience. She had ordered tea for 2 in her sitting room on 7 evenings. He had joined her once. The other 6 had been given to Lionel, estate papers, or silence behind the study door. Still, she had continued trying. That was why the words struck so deeply when she said, "These families do not need indulgence. They need you to hear the truth before issuing an order." Alistair reached for the silver dinner bell beside his plate. Its handle was shaped like a hawk with folded wings. He rang it once. The bright note cut through the room. A footman stepped forward, expecting an instruction. Instead, Alistair looked at Rosamund. "You will give me an heir, not conversation." The footman froze. "Mr." Vane lowered his eyes. Clarissa did not smile, but satisfaction softened the corners of her mouth. Lionel leaned back as though proper order had been restored. Rosamund felt heat rise beneath her skin. She did not drop her gaze. She did not excuse herself. She did not grant any person at that table the comfort of watching her break. "Mr. Vane," she said, still looking at Alistair, "the southern boundary will remain open for 3 days." Lionel frowned. "Your Grace, the Duke has just made his position clear." Rosamund turned to the steward. "During those 3 days, you will inspect the northern drainage with the rector and 2 tenant representatives. If the field is safe, the cattle will be moved. If it is not, the southern pasture remains open until repairs are complete." Vane hesitated. Every eye went to Alistair. The Duke could have contradicted her. He could have reduced her further by treating the order as nothing. Instead, something in her composure forced him to hear the reasoning he had just declared unnecessary. "The Duchess's instruction stands," he said. Lionel's expression hardened. Rosamund inclined her head once. "Thank you, Your Grace." She spoke with the courtesy of a stranger. Dinner continued. Clarissa discussed a music-hall in Winchester. Lionel spoke about winter grain prices. Alistair ate nothing after the fish course. Rosamund answered every guest who addressed her. She asked Mrs. Bell whether the kitchen maid with the burned hand had received lighter duty. She asked Vane for the drainage report by noon. She complimented Clarissa's arrangement of the autumn flowers. She did not speak to her husband again. After the guests withdrew, Rosamund returned alone to the dining room. The servants had cleared the plates, but the silver bell remained beside Alistair's chair. She picked it up. The metal was cool in her hand. Beneath its rim, a small ivory clapper hung from a narrow chain. She unfastened it carefully and placed the piece in her pocket. Then she returned the silent bell to the table. In her sitting room, 2 cups waited beside a pot of tea. Mrs. Bell had continued the arrangement Rosamund requested during the first week of marriage. 1 cup stood near her usual chair. The other stood opposite it. Rosamund looked at both for several seconds. "Only 1 cup from tomorrow," she said. Mrs. Bell's face tightened with concern. "Yes, Your Grace." Alistair came after 10. He stopped at the threshold rather than entering fully. Rosamund. She stood near the fire with her hands folded before her. He had dismissed the guests early. Lionel had left displeased. Clarissa had retired with a headache. None of that mattered. "I should not have said it before others," Alistair said. Rosamund waited. He mistook silence for permission to continue. "The estate has been unstable. Lionel presses too hard, but he is not wrong that appearances matter. I cannot have every disagreement become a public contest." Rosamund looked at him and felt the last fragile thread of hope go still. He regretted the audience. He did not regret the belief. Alistair took 1 step into the room. "I did approve your order." She moved to the writing desk, took a small card, and wrote a single sentence. She held it out. He read it. "The cattle will remain on safe ground. Mr. Vane will report at noon." Alistair looked from the card to her face. "I was speaking about us." Rosamund set the pencil down. Then she crossed the room, lifted the 2nd teacup from the tray, and handed it to Mrs. Bell. The housekeeper carried it away. Alistair remained by the door, watching the empty place opposite Rosamund's chair. The next morning, he learned the rule she had made. without announcement. Rosamund spoke to Mrs. Bell about household accounts. She spoke to Mr. Vane about the drainage ditch. She spoke to a footman about his mother's illness, and to Lady Sybil Ellery when her carriage arrived before luncheon. When Alistair asked whether she would join him in the library, Rosamund wrote her answer and gave it to Vane. Her Grace will attend at 11. She did attend. She discussed every estate matter through notes, records, or the steward's voice. She answered everyone in the room except her husband. By the time the clock struck noon, Alistair understood that Rosamund had not lost her voice. She had withdrawn it from him, and the silence she left behind was louder than the bell he could no longer ring. 3 weeks later, every servant at Alderwick Hall understood the Duchess's silence, though none dared name it. Rosamund spoke in the breakfast room, the still room, the schoolroom prepared for future children, and the covered passage leading to the kitchens. She spoke to tenants who came with petitions, and to Lady Sybil when she visited from Bath. She even spoke to Clarissa with measured courtesy. Only Alistair received written cards, brief nods, and the quiet withdrawal of her attention. The rule did not embarrass him in public. That was part of its power. She never refused duty. She never caused a scene. She simply gave him exactly what he had asked for. An heir remained a matter for the future. Conversation did not. On an October morning, Rosamund entered the smaller dining room to find Lady Clarissa standing beside the sideboard with a silver spoon in her hand. Nell, the youngest kitchen maid, stood near the door, white-faced and trembling. Mrs. Bell had not yet arrived. 2 footmen waited along the wall. Alistair sat at the head of the table with a letter open before him. Lionel stood near the fire, watching with the alert stillness of a man who preferred accusations when they served a purpose. "There you are," Clarissa said. "I was about to send for you." Rosamund looked from the spoon to Nell. "What has happened?" "This was found in the linen cupboard," Clarissa replied. "Nell was seen leaving that passage yesterday evening." Nell clasped her hands. "I didn't take it, Your Grace." Clarissa's expression sharpened. "You were told not to speak until questioned." Rosamund turned to the maid. "You are being questioned now. Where were you going?" "To fetch a clean apron. Cook spilled broth on mine." "Did you enter the linen cupboard?" "No, Your Grace." Clarissa lifted the spoon. "Then perhaps the silver walked there by itself." Lionel gave a quiet breath that almost became a laugh. Alistair closed the letter but said nothing. Rosamund looked at the spoon more closely. A faint line of black polish marked the handle. "Mrs. Bell," she said. The housekeeper entered at that moment, carrying the household keys. She took in the scene and stopped. "Your Grace, when was the breakfast service last counted?" "Monday morning." "Was anything missing?" "1 spoon from the small service, but it had been sent to the silversmith because the bowl was bent." Clarissa's fingers tightened around the handle. Rosamund asked, "Was the repaired piece returned?" Mrs. Bell opened the household account book kept on the side table. "Yesterday afternoon, the silversmith's boy left it with the upper footman." One of the footmen shifted. Rosamund looked at him. "Where did you place it?" "On the sideboard, Your Grace. I told Mr. Phelps it had come back." "Did anyone instruct you to put it away?" Lady Clarissa asked whether the service was complete. "I said 1 piece had just returned." Clarissa set the spoon down. "That proves nothing." Nell was still in the passage. "It proves the spoon was not stolen," Rosamund said. "It was misplaced after repair." Clarissa's colour rose. A household cannot be run by indulging every servant's excuse. nor can it be run by assigning guilt before facts are known. Nell's eyes filled, though she kept her head bowed. Rosamund looked at her. You will return to the kitchen. No mark will be entered against your name. Clarissa turned toward Alistair. Surely you will not permit this sort of laxity. Alistair's gaze moved to Rosamund. She did not look at him. He had watched every question, every answer, and the moment she protected the maid without performing kindness for approval. The Duchess's decision stands, he said. Clarissa went still. Lionel frowned at the floor. Nell whispered, Thank you, Your Grace. Rosamund saw the girl's shame had not disappeared merely because the accusation had. Come to my sitting room after the noon meal, she said. Mrs. Bell will come with you. Nell nodded and left. The room emptied slowly. Clarissa departed with Lionel, speaking under her breath about the dangers of sentiment. Mrs. Bell followed after collecting the spoon. Alistair remained at the table. Rosamund poured tea. You handled that well, he said. She lifted one brow, then took a card from the writing case she now carried. The spoon had an account. Nell had only her word. Both required examination. She placed the card beside his plate. Alistair read it. I was not praising the account. Rosamund took her cup and moved to the window. He watched her for several seconds. I remember a dinner before we married, he said. Lord Wexham spent half an hour describing his hounds as though Parliament depended upon them. Rosamund did not turn. You told me his favourite animal was himself. The corner of her mouth moved before she could prevent it. The small change struck him with surprising force. He had forgotten the sound of her laughter from that evening. Not because it had been unremarkable, but because he had never considered it something he might lose. You made me laugh, he said. Rosamund's expression closed again. She wrote another card. Nell will come at noon. She is not to be questioned again. Alistair looked at the sentence and understood the conversation had ended. At midday, Nell arrived with Mrs. Bell. Rosamund asked about her family, her work, and whether Clarissa had accused her before. Nell admitted that Lady Clarissa often believed servants first and investigated later. She says, quick discipline prevents larger faults, the girl said. Rosamund handed her a clean handkerchief. Fear also creates silence. Silence can hide truth as easily as guilt. Nell looked at her with shy gratitude. To ease the girl's embarrassment, Rosamund told her about a footman in her father's house who had once hidden 6 oranges inside a warming pan because he thought they were too beautiful to be eaten. Nell laughed despite herself. Alistair passed the open sitting-room door at that moment. He stopped unseen in the corridor. Rosamund's voice was warm. Her eyes were bright with humour. She did not look like a woman who had chosen coldness. She looked like a woman who had protected warmth from the one person most likely to diminish it. Later that afternoon, Mr. Vane brought Rosamund the latest council minutes. She sat with Lady Sybil in the small library while autumn light faded across the carpet. The first 2 pages contained routine harvest accounts. The third recorded a winter coal proposal for the tenants near St. Anne's. Rosamund read the line once, then again. Proposed by Lord Lionel Harcourt. She looked at Vane. Who first raised the coal allowance? Vane hesitated. You did, Your Grace. At which meeting? The consultation on October 7th. Was Lord Lionel present? He arrived near the end. Lady Sybil leaned closer. Then, why is the measure entered under his name? Vane lowered his voice. The rough notes were collected after the meeting. The final copy came to me the next morning on blue-edged paper. Rosamund turned the page toward the window. The edge carried a narrow blue border, unlike the cream sheets normally used in the estate office. Who supplied it? I do not know. Who collected the rough notes? Vane looked uncomfortable. Lady Clarissa offered to arrange them. Sybil's face hardened. How generous of her. Rosamund did not answer. She opened the previous month's minutes and found the same blue edge beneath an entry concerning repairs to 2 widow cottages. The recommendation had also been credited to Lionel. She did not search further. 2 examples were enough to establish a pattern and too few to reveal its purpose. Make no accusation, she told Vane. Request the original notes from both meetings. Under whose authority? Rosamund looked at him steadily. Mine. Alistair entered the library before Vane could reply. He stopped when he saw the papers spread across the table. What has happened? Rosamund took a card and wrote, Her Grace requests the rough notes from the October 7th Council and the Widow Cottage consultation. Vane handed him the message. Alistair read it, then examined the blue-edged minutes. Why? Rosamund tapped Lionel's name, then placed her own draft proposal beside it. The language was nearly identical. Alistair compared the 2. Lionel presented this. Vane answered carefully. He spoke in favour of it, Your Grace, after the Duchess had already proposed it. And the widow cottages? Also Her Grace's recommendation. Alistair's face changed. Not enough for anger, enough for recognition. He had spent 3 weeks noticing every absence Rosamund created around him. Now he saw the first proof that someone else had been filling those absences with borrowed credit. Find the rough notes, he ordered. Vane bowed. Rosamund gathered the papers before Alistair could ask for more. As she turned away, he said, Rosamund. She paused, but did not face him. I did not know. Her shoulders remained still. She wrote without sitting down and left the card on the table. That is becoming less of a defence each day. Then she departed with Lady Sybil. Alistair remained beside the blue-edged minutes, staring at Lionel's name, written over work that had begun in his wife's mind. For the first time, the silence between them no longer seemed like the consequence of one cruel sentence. It seemed like the space in which other people had begun stealing what he had refused to hear. By the 2nd week of December, the frost had hardened the lanes around Alderwick Hall, and the estate council had begun to fail without Rosamund's voice. The trouble started with a boundary stone no one could find. 2 tenant families from St. Anne's claimed the same strip of winter grazing. Lionel proposed raising both rents until one withdrew. Mr. Vane objected that punishment would not settle ownership. Alistair asked for the estate map, but the paper showed only a faded line beside an ash tree that had fallen years before. The consultation stalled. Rosamund sat near the fire with Lady Sybil, reviewing parish relief accounts. She had not been invited to advise, though every man in the room knew she understood the dispute. Alistair looked toward her twice. She did not lift her head. Lionel rested one hand on the back of a chair. The tenants are testing authority, he said. Increase the rent on the contested ground. The family with the weaker claim will retreat. Or both will sell stock to pay it, Vane replied. Then the estate loses 2 reliable households. Lionel's expression cooled. A steward should administer decisions, not soften them. Alistair's jaw tightened. A year earlier, Lionel had used similar language when tenants gathered outside the gates. At the time, the certainty had felt like rescue. Now it sounded rehearsed. No rent increase, Alistair said. Lionel turned. Then what do you propose? Alistair looked again at Rosamund. She continued writing. He could have ordered her to answer. He could have invoked rank, duty, or urgency. Instead, He rose and crossed the room only far enough to place the map on a side table within her reach. "Her Grace may examine this if she chooses," he said to Vane. Rosamund did not look at him. She finished the line in her account book, closed it, and drew the map closer. For several minutes, she studied the faded boundary marks. Then she took a blank card and wrote a short instruction. "Ask Mr. Pike whether the old stone trough still stands near the eastern hedge." Vane read the card aloud. One tenant representative, summoned from the outer room, confirmed that the trough remained, half covered by briars. Rosamund wrote again. The boundary stone was moved after the ash fell. It should lie 3 paces north of the trough, beneath the drainage bank. Alistair sent 2 estate men to inspect the place. They returned before noon, carrying mud on their boots and certainty in their faces. The stone had been found exactly where Rosamund predicted. The disputed strip belonged to the Western holding. No rent increase was needed. No family had to retreat. Lionel dismissed the discovery as old local knowledge. Useful, perhaps, but hardly governance. Alistair looked at him. Preventing an unjust charge is governance. Lionel's eyes narrowed. It was the first time Alistair had contradicted him before the estate officers without softening the disagreement. Vane entered the correction into the council book. He wrote Rosamund's name beside the decision. Alistair watched the ink settle. Rosamund did not thank him. She had not asked for generosity. She had asked for accuracy. The household gathered 3 nights later for a modest Christmas supper. Snow had begun before dusk, whitening the courtyard and trapping several county guests at Alderwick. Clarissa arranged the table with winter greenery and silver branches. She placed Lionel at Alistair's right hand and Rosamund midway down the table beside an elderly baronet who spoke almost entirely about fox coverts. Rosamund answered him with patient humour. At one point, she observed that gentlemen discussed foxes with greater tenderness than they discussed most relatives. The baronet laughed so loudly that even the servants smiled. Alistair heard her from the head of the table. He remembered the dinner before their marriage, when she had made the same kind of quiet joke about Lord Wexham and his hounds. He had laughed then. He had also assumed there would always be another evening, another conversation, another opportunity to know her. He understood now that neglect did not preserve opportunities. It spent them. Clarissa lifted her glass. Her Grace has a rare talent for making light of serious things. Rosamund turned toward her, only when seriousness has been used to excuse foolishness. The baronet lowered his wine to hide another smile. Clarissa's expression remained pleasant. One hopes the same wit does not enter estate business. Tenants require steadiness, not cleverness. Lionel added, especially when winter relief is involved. Sentiment is expensive in cold weather. Alistair set down his fork. The winter coal allowance was the Duchess' proposal. Conversation stopped. Clarissa looked toward him. Lionel's face became unreadable. Alistair continued. The repairs to the widow cottages were also hers. Both were entered incorrectly in the final minutes. A county gentleman near the end of the table said, "I had understood Lord Lionel arranged those measures." "Then you were misinformed," Alistair replied. His tone was calm, but no one mistook the correction for casual conversation. The credit belongs to Rosamund. Every face turned toward her. Public acknowledgement should have felt like vindication. Instead, Rosamund felt the strange emptiness of receiving from him what should never have been taken. She inclined her head to the guests, then resumed, speaking to the baronet about the snow. Alistair watched her refuse to make his correction into a private reconciliation. He had done what was right. That did not mean he had repaired what was wrong. After supper, he found her in the morning room, reviewing the Christmas coal lists. Lady Sybil sat nearby with embroidery she had not touched for half an hour. Alistair stopped at the threshold. "May I enter?" Rosamund looked at Lady Sybil. Sybil folded her work. "I believe I shall see whether Mrs. Bell needs help with the guests." She left without waiting for an answer. Alistair remained by the door until Rosamund gave one small nod. He crossed the room but did not approach her desk. "I corrected the record tonight." Rosamund took a card. The record required correction. "Yes." He read the sentence. "I also owe you an apology." She waited. "I should have asked where the coal proposal began. I should have examined the minutes when you first raised the discrepancy." Rosamund wrote again. "You regret losing my counsel. That is not yet the same as regretting how you saw me." Alistair read the words twice. The fire shifted behind him. "No," he said at last. Rosamund looked up. He seemed older than he had at dinner in September, not weaker, less protected by certainty. "I thought authority meant choosing what mattered and refusing distraction," he continued. "You were trying to tell me that people mattered before order. I treated that as interference." Rosamund's fingers rested on the pencil. For one brief moment, she almost spoke. Then she remembered the silver bell, Clarissa's lowered eyes, Lionel's satisfaction, and the second teacup carried away. She wrote instead, "Understanding begins when explanation ends." Alistair accepted the card. "Then I will stop explaining." He left without asking her to forgive him. The next morning, a boy from St. Anne's arrived at Alderwick with a paper folded beneath his coat. He had found it nailed beside the parish church notices before dawn. Mr. Vane brought it to Rosamund in the breakfast room. The document bore the Hawkridge seal in dark red wax and proposed a winter rent increase for 3 village holdings. At the bottom appeared a signature copied carefully in a hand meant to resemble hers. Rosamund Merworth. Rosamund stared at it. On private notes to Lady Sybil, she used that name. On estate orders, she signed Rosamund, Duchess of Hawkridge. Whoever had forged the petition had seen her personal correspondence, but not understood her formal practice. Alistair entered, as Vane explained where the paper had been found. He read the petition, then looked at Rosamund. "Did you sign this?" She took the sheet from him and wrote beneath the false name in her own clear hand, "Rosamund, Duchess of Hawkridge." Then she placed both signatures side by side. Vane understood first. The wrong form. Rosamund nodded. Outside, churchgoers were already gathering before the posted notice. By noon, 3 villages would believe their Duchess had chosen winter to raise their rents. The theft of her ideas had been quiet. The theft of her name had been made public. By 10 o'clock, the forged petition had been read aloud outside St. Anne's Church by men who had never seen Rosamund sign an estate order, and women who had already begun calculating which meals could be made smaller. Rosamund arrived in a closed carriage with Lady Sybil and Mr. Vane. Frost still silvered the churchyard wall. The paper remained nailed beside the parish notices, its false signature visible beneath the Hawkridge seal. No one bowed when she stepped down. That hurt more than open anger would have done. Respect had not vanished. It had been withdrawn. Agnes Pike stood near the gate with 2 other tenant wives. She held the edge of her shawl beneath her chin and watched Rosamund approach, as though waiting to see whether a duchess could look directly at the people, whose winter she had supposedly made harder. "Your Grace," Agnes said, "is it true? Rosamund stopped before her. No, the paper bears your name. It bears a copy of my private signature. Formal estate orders are signed differently. A farmer near the wall called. Words can be changed after the fact. Rosamund turned toward him. Yes, that is why you should not trust my denial, merely because I hold a title. The answer unsettled the gathering. Several people had expected outrage, perhaps command. Rosamund gave them neither. The original recommendation will be copied into the parish register. Future measures concerning rent, flour, grazing, or relief will be entered at St. Anne's before they are carried to Alderwick. The rector stepped from the church porch. I will keep the copies in my own custody. Agnes looked at the petition again, and the rent. It will not be raised. Can the Duke say the same? Rosamund did not turn toward Alistair's carriage, which had just entered the lane behind hers. She took a card from her reticule, wrote one sentence, and gave it to Vane. The steward read it aloud. Her Grace asks His Grace to confirm that no increase will take effect without examination of the original papers. Alistair had heard from several yards away. He came forward, removed his hat, and faced the tenants. I confirm it. No rent will be raised on the authority of that notice. The farmer folded his arms. Then someone in your house uses the Duchess's name. Alistair's expression hardened. Yes, he did not soften the answer, and that person will be found. The crowd began to break apart, but suspicion did not leave with it. A woman carrying a basket crossed the road to the village shop. Rosamund followed because Mrs. Bell had arranged for winter blankets to be distributed there. The shopkeeper's wife stood behind the counter beside 3 folded grey blankets. When Rosamund entered, the woman lowered her eyes. Your Grace, Mrs. Holt, the blankets are for the families near the Marsh cottages. Mrs. Holt touched the top blanket but did not lift it. They won't take them. Why? The woman glanced toward the window, where villagers still gathered around the notice. They say it's wrong to accept charity from the same hand that raises their rents. The words were not cruelly spoken. That made them worse. Rosamund felt the shame of being misunderstood settle beneath her ribs. She could have ordered the blankets delivered. She could have reminded Mrs. Holt that the supplies had been paid for from her own allowance. Instead, she said, "Then do not call them mine." Mrs. Holt looked up. Your Grace, enter them as parish stores. Let the rector distribute them. But you purchased them. The families need warmth, not gratitude. Mrs. Holt's face changed. I'm sorry. Do not apologize for believing what you were shown. Rosamund turned to leave. Agnes Pike had followed them inside and heard every word. I still don't know what to believe, Agnes said. Rosamund met her gaze. Then believe the records when they are placed where no one household can alter them. Outside, Alistair waited near the carriage. He had seen Rosamund leave the shop without the acknowledgement that should have accompanied her generosity. He looked toward the folded blankets in Mrs. Holt's hands, then at the forged notice beside the church. The attack was more precise than insult. Whoever had planned it understood that Rosamund's greatest strength was not rank. It was trust. The purpose was to poison that trust before she knew she was being judged. Rosamund returned to Alderwick before noon and began the ledger. Lady Sybil sat opposite her in the small library, while Vane brought the parish copies, the surviving rough notes, and the final blue-edged minutes. Rosamund ruled a line down the center of a brown leather book. On the left, she wrote original recommendation. On the right, she wrote final entry. Beneath that she added date, witnesses, location of copy. You're building a second archive, Sybil said. I am building an archive that cannot be rewritten by one room. Vane placed the coal papers before her. The original parish note named Rosamund. The final minute named Lionel. The rent petition reversed the pattern. Its proposal had no known origin, yet the printed version carried her private signature. Rosamund did not add every household irregularity she remembered. She entered only what could be proved. No suspicions, she said, only documents, dates, and witnesses. Sybil examined the forged petition. Who has seen you sign Rosamund Mareworth? You, Alistair, Clarissa, Lionel, Mrs. Bell. Several correspondents, too many. Then the signature narrows nothing by itself. Vane unfolded a parish copy dated the previous autumn, this May. It concerned the bakehouse near St. Anne's. The original recommendation preserved the winter subsidy. The final blue-edged entry, prepared weeks later, ordered the bakehouse closed at the following Michaelmas and attributed the decision to Rosamund. Sybil stared at the page. They are planning ahead. Rosamund read the date again. The closure had not yet been announced. It had been prepared months before anyone could claim circumstances required it. This is not an attempt to hide one theft, she said. It is a design. For what? Vane asked. Rosamund looked toward the windows, where the road to St. Anne's disappeared beyond bare trees. To make cruelty arrive wearing my name. Alistair entered after knocking. He stopped at the threshold. Rosamund closed the ledger at once. May I come in? She glanced at Lady Sybil. Sybil gave one small nod. Rosamund motioned toward the chair, farthest from the desk. Alistair sat. Vane told me about the parish copies. Rosamund wrote a card. Copies will remain at St. Anne's and with Lady Sybil. Agreed, he said. She wrote again. The private ledger remains in my custody. Alistair looked at the brown book. You think I would take it? Rosamund held his gaze, then wrote, I think access without permission is how this began. The words landed without anger. Alistair lowered his eyes. You are right. He did not ask to see the ledger. That evening, Mrs. Bell brought a small iron box to Rosamund's sitting room. It was plain, heavy, and fitted with a new lock. His Grace ordered it from the estate office, she said. There is one key. Rosamund took the key from her. Does he hold another? No, Your Grace. The locksmith gave both to His Grace. He broke the second before Mr. Vane. Rosamund looked at the box for a long moment. It was not trust. Trust could not be delivered in iron, yet restraint had weight too, and Alistair had chosen to make his own exclusion visible. She placed the ledger inside, followed by the forged petition and the parish copy concerning the bakehouse. Then she locked it. Near midnight, a loose sheet slid from the folded bakehouse papers as she prepared to close the lid. It was a printer's proof, unsigned and unfinished, bordered in blue. The heading read Michaelmas Notice, 1817. Beneath it, a blank space waited for the Duchess's formal name. The lower paragraph announced the closure of the parish bakehouse and a reduction in winter flour support. At the bottom, in pencil, someone had written, Her Grace to answer questions in person. Rosamund read the line twice. The humiliation outside St. Anne's had not been the climax. It had been rehearsal. Whoever had forged her name was preparing to bring the entire estate before her at Michaelmas and demand that she defend decisions she had never made. She placed the proof inside the iron box and turned the key. 8 months remained before the trap was meant to close. By April, the locked iron box in Rosamund's sitting room held 5 documents, 3 parish copies, and one question she still could not answer. Was the conspiracy meant only to discredit her, or to make Alistair distrust her so completely that she could be removed from estate affairs without protest. Spring came early to Hampshire that year. The lawns around Alderwick turned green, the roads dried, and the old music room was opened for the first time since winter. Rosamund went there at dawn because no one else used it. Dust had been cleared from the pianoforte. Though the curtains still smelled faintly of cedar and closed rooms, she sat alone and began a Haydn sonata she had once practiced for Alistair during the first month of their marriage. At that time, she had imagined playing it after supper while he sat near the fire, perhaps with a book he did not read because he was listening. The hope embarrassed her now. Still, her hands remembered the music. Alistair heard it from the corridor. He had risen early after another sleepless night, spent reviewing estate correspondence. At first, he thought a guest had arrived. Then he recognized Rosamund's touch. Controlled but not cold, every phrase held back until restraint itself became feeling. He stopped at the doorway. She did not see him immediately. Her face had softened, not into happiness exactly, but into privacy. For several measures, he saw the woman she was when no one demanded usefulness from her. Then she glanced toward the door. The music ended in the middle of a phrase. Rosamund closed the lid over the keys and stood. Alistair moved aside before she reached him. "I did not mean to interrupt." She did not answer. "I have never heard you play." Rosamund looked at him for one quiet second, then passed into the corridor. Lady Sybil approached from the stairwell and saw both of them. Her gaze followed Rosamund before returning to Alistair. "She used to play often," Sybil said, "before the wedding." Alistair looked back at the closed pianoforte. "Why did she stop?" Sybil's expression carried no mercy, perhaps because no one listened. He absorbed the words without defense. "Did she intend to play that piece for me?" "Yes." Sybil came nearer. "She practiced it for weeks. She arranged private supper twice. You cancelled both evenings. Estate business. Lord Lionel." Alistair's silence confirmed it. Sybil continued. "You did not merely fail to notice her judgment. You failed to notice her attempts at companionship. Do not mistake the loss of her conversation for the loss of advice." She left him at the doorway. That afternoon, Alistair wrote to Rosamund. He did not begin with an apology. The word had been made too small by careless use. He began with the truth. "I treated marriage as a structure already complete, once vows were spoken. I believed duty would stand where affection had not yet grown. When fear entered estate matters, I gave Lionel the authority of certainty because he had helped restore order after the protest. I allowed his judgment to replace my own. Worse, I treated your wish to speak as a challenge to control. I did not ask what you loved. I did not ask what frightened you. I did not ask what sort of life you had hoped to build here. I saw the role before I saw the woman. I regret the belief, not merely the sentence it produced. I do not ask you to speak to me. I do not ask you to forgive me. I only ask that this truth be placed beside the harm. Because I am beginning to understand the difference between losing your counsel and losing the part of you that once wished to be known by me." He folded the letter, sealed it, and placed it outside her sitting-room door. Rosamund found it after dinner. She read it once standing, then again beside the fire. The line about the woman she had wished him to know struck deepest. He had named the wound correctly at last. That did not mean he had healed it. She opened the iron box and placed the letter beneath the forged petition. For several moments, her hand rested on the lid. Then she closed it. The following evening, Lionel entered Alistair's study without waiting to be announced. He carried 2 county letters and the easy confidence of a man accustomed to private access. "The situation with Rosamund is becoming difficult," he said. Alistair did not invite him to sit. "In what sense?" "Her silence is being noticed." "By whom?" "People whose opinions matter." Lionel placed the letters on the desk. "A duchess who refuses ordinary communication with her husband invites speculation. Bath would provide distance. Clarissa has friends there. Rosamund might recover her balance away from estate concerns." Alistair looked at him. "Recover from what?" Lionel's expression remained smooth. "Resentment, fixation, whatever has driven this display. She speaks to everyone else. That makes it more calculated, or more specific." Lionel's patience thinned. "You cannot permit a private grievance to reshape the household." "The household was already shaped," Alistair said, "by men deciding what she was permitted to matter." Lionel went still. Alistair continued. "Why are you so determined to remove her from estate affairs?" "Because your authority cannot survive constant correction by your wife. Her corrections have prevented false rents, protected tenants, and exposed altered records. And every time you acknowledge her publicly, you weaken the distinction between Duke and Duchess." Alistair rose. "Then perhaps the distinction was never meant to be measured by how little she is allowed to know." Lionel stared at him. "You sound governed." "No, I sound less governed by you." For the first time since the tenant protest, Lionel lost control of his expression. It vanished quickly, but Alistair saw it. "Be careful," Lionel said. "A wife who learns that silence wins concessions may never stop using it." "She has not asked me for concessions. She has asked for power. She asked to be heard." Lionel left without bowing. At supper 2 nights later, Clarissa arranged the places with Lionel at Alistair's right, and Rosamund near the far end beside a visiting dowager. The arrangement was subtle enough to appear accidental. Alistair entered, saw the cards, and moved Rosamund's place to his left. He did not announce the correction. He simply changed it. Clarissa noticed at once. The seating was arranged according to precedence. "Then it was arranged incorrectly," Alistair said. Rosamund arrived moments later. Her gaze touched the changed card, then moved to Clarissa. She understood what had happened. During supper, the dowager asked Rosamund whether she preferred London concerts or private music. Rosamund answered that music became most honest when no one applauded too soon. The dowager laughed. Rosamund spoke about Haydn, childhood lessons at Ellery House, and the old chapel organ her father had allowed village children to hear on winter afternoons. Alistair listened without intruding. She described a world that existed before him and had continued beyond his attention. Her mind was not valuable only when it prevented a rent increase. It held memory, wit, tenderness, and tastes he had never bothered to learn. When she smiled at something Lady Sybil said, Alistair felt the loss of every evening he had assumed could be postponed. After supper, Mr. Vane asked Rosamund to meet him in the stationery room. Lady Sybil went with her. Alistair remained outside until Vane invited him in. On the central table lay a stack of unused blue-edged forms. The top sheet carried no signature, only a printed heading for a Michaelmas estate notice. Beneath it were blank spaces for rent adjustments, flower allowances, and parish closures. At the bottom, a line waited for the words, "Recommended by Her Grace, the Duchess of Hawkridge." "Where did these come from?" Alistair asked. Vane held up the stationer's wrapping. "Delivered this morning, ordered 3 months ago." "By whom?" "The order bears only the household account mark." Rosamund examined the paper. The form had been prepared before any consultation, before any petition, before any decision. Someone was not altering records after meetings. Someone was designing the meeting's conclusion in advance. She took a card and wrote one sentence for Vane to read aloud. They are preparing not only to accuse me, but to make the accusation appear inevitable. Alistair looked at the blue-edged forms. Lionel's warning returned to him, a wife who learns that silence wins concessions. The sentence had not been concern. It had been preparation. Outside the stationery room, the spring evening remained mild and bright. Inside, September had already been written. By the last week of August, false schedules had appeared in all 3 villages, each one bearing Rosamund's title beneath decisions she had never made. The papers announced higher rents, reduced flour allowances, and the closure of the St. Anne's bakehouse at Michaelmas. No parish copy supported them. No original draft existed, yet the print was clean, the Hawkridge seal was convincing, and the wording matched the blue-edged forms found in Alderwick's stationery room. Anger travelled faster than correction. On the morning Rosamund rode out to meet the tenants, the road beyond the western hedge was already blocked. Men stood across the lane, holding the schedules above their heads. Women gathered behind them with baskets, shawls, and children kept close. The carriage slowed before Alistair could call to the driver. Mr. Vane rode ahead with 2 estate men. Lady Sybil sat beside Rosamund. Alistair faced them from the opposite seat, his expression controlled but alert. "There are more than 20, he said. Rosamund looked through the glass. Agnes Pike stood near the front. Beside her, the farmer who had challenged Rosamund outside St. Anne's Church held one of the false notices. Rosamund opened the small writing slate resting on her lap. "Do not order them away before hearing them." She turned it toward Alistair. He read the sentence and nodded once. "I won't." The carriage stopped. A man called, "We'll have an answer before Michaelmas." Another shouted, "Her name is on every page." Alistair reached for the door. Rosamund touched his sleeve. He looked down at her hand, then at her face. She withdrew and wrote again. "If I remain inside, they will believe I am afraid to answer." Alistair's jaw tightened. His first instinct was visible. Close the door. Clear the road. Place rank between danger and his wife. Nearly a year earlier, he would have called that protection. Now he understood that fear could borrow the language of care. He opened the door and stepped down. "Her Grace will speak," he said. "You will listen without pressing forward." Rosamund followed. He offered his hand. She placed her fingers in his only long enough to descend, then moved ahead of him. The crowd quieted because she did not stand behind the Duke. She stood before the carriage alone. "I did not authorize these schedules," she said. Her voice carried clearly across the lane. The rent increases, flour reductions, and bakehouse closure were prepared without my consent. The farmer lifted his paper. "Then why is your title printed beneath them?" "Because someone wishes you to believe cruelty came from me." A murmur spread through the group. Agnes Pike stepped forward. "We believed you in January. We waited for the parish copies. Now these have reached every village. And the parish copies still contradict them. Can we see them?" "At Michaelmas, every original will be laid before the trustees, the rector, and representatives from each village." A man near the hedge called, "Why should we wait another month?" Rosamund looked toward him. "You should not wait in silence. Bring every schedule you have. Ask who ordered the paper. Ask who used the seal. Ask why no one entered these decisions at St. Anne's." "You are asking us to trust the same house that printed them," someone said. "No," Rosamund replied. I am asking you to trust records kept outside this house." The answer changed the crowd. Suspicion remained, but its direction shifted. Alistair watched the tenants study her. She did not plead for affection. She gave them a method for questioning power, including her own. "Will the bakehouse remain open?" Agnes asked. "Yes." "The flour?" "Unchanged." "And the rents?" "No increase will take effect without the original papers being examined in public." Agnes looked past Rosamund toward Alistair. "Will His Grace say the same?" Rosamund took out the slate. She wrote only 4 words. "Please answer them plainly." She handed it to Vane, who passed it to Alistair. He read it, then faced the tenants. "No rent will rise on the strength of those schedules. The bakehouse will remain open. The flour allowance will not be reduced." The farmer lowered his paper slightly. "And if the records prove someone inside Alderwick did this, then rank will not protect them." The words had barely left Alistair when a sharp crack sounded behind Rosamund. The carriage window shattered. Alistair moved before thought. He stepped between her and the lane, one arm raised across her shoulders as fragments struck the carriage door and fell harmlessly onto the road. Rosamund went still beneath his protection. He did not pull her against him. He did not turn the moment into possession. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook her head. He stepped back at once. A stable lad stood near the hedge, pale and frozen, an empty sling hanging from one hand. 2 estate men started toward him. "Stop," Alistair ordered. They halted. The crowd recoiled from the boy, as though he had become evidence no one wanted to touch. Rosamund looked at him. "What is your name?" "Thomas Reed, Your Grace." His voice shook. "Why did you throw the stone?" "I was told to break the glass." "By whom?" Thomas glanced toward the crowd, then toward the road behind them. "A servant. I don't know his name." Alistair's expression hardened. "Describe him." The boy swallowed. Dark coat, brown hat. He carried a cane. Rosamund asked, "What kind of cane?" "Silver head." "A bird." "What bird?" "A hawk, I think." Mr. Vane looked at Alistair. Lionel carried a silver-headed cane shaped like a hawk in flight. It was distinctive, but not proof. Rosamund kept her voice calm. "What were you promised?" 2 crowns. He said no one would be hurt. He said the Duchess would turn back, and then everyone would know she was afraid to answer. The purpose of the attack settled over the road. It had not been meant to injure her. It had been meant to complete a story already printed on paper. Alistair turned to the estate men. "Thomas will go to the rectory. The rector will keep him there until the magistrate hears his statement. No one is to threaten him or question him alone." The boy looked stunned. "You're not sending me to the lodge?" "No." Alistair glanced at Rosamund before continuing. "You will be treated as a witness." Rosamund gave one small nod. Agnes Pike looked toward the broken carriage window. "Someone wanted us to believe," she ran. The farmer beside her folded his schedule and placed it inside his coat. She didn't. No applause followed. The acknowledgement was quieter and more valuable. Rosamund returned to the carriage. Alistair's right glove had been cut by the broken glass. A narrow stain darkened the leather. He tried to hide the hand against his coat. Rosamund saw it. She took a clean handkerchief from her reticule and held it out. Their eyes met. Nearly 11 months had passed since she had last spoken directly to him. Concern rose in her face, but she did not spend her voice. Alistair accepted the cloth without touching her fingers. "Thank you," he said. She inclined her head and looked away. The journey resumed in Lady Sybil's carriage, while servants covered the damaged window of the first. At Alderwick, Clarissa waited beneath the stone arch, as if she had known exactly when they would return. Her gaze moved from the broken glass to Alistair's bandaged hand, then to Thomas riding beside the rector's groom. "How dreadful," she said. "People may say the incident was arranged to win sympathy." Rosamund stepped down. "Then they may hear the boy's statement." Clarissa's eyes flickered toward Thomas only once. Rosamund saw it. So did Alistair. "You cannot mean to bring village gossip into a trustees' meeting," Clarissa said. "A frightened boy is not evidence." Rosamund looked at Vane. He read from her slate. "Her Grace says fear does not make truth less useful." Clarissa's mouth tightened. That afternoon, copies of a formal invitation appeared in all 3 villages. Principal tenants, parish officers, and trustees were summoned to Alderwick on Michaelmas Day. The notice declared that the Duchess of Hawkridge would answer questions concerning rent, flour, and the bakehouse in person. At the bottom, beneath the printed heading, someone had added a final line in ink. "Let the estate judge whether silence is innocence or incapacity." Rosamund read the words beside the iron box in her sitting room. 1 month remained before the anniversary of Alistair's command. The people who had taken her name now intended to turn her silence into proof against her. On Michaelmas morning, 1 year after the dinner that had silenced her marriage, Rosamund entered the great hall carrying the ivory clapper in her reticule. Alderwick had never looked less like a home. Benches filled the length of the room. Principal tenants from all 3 villages sat beside parish officers and the rector of St. Anne's. 3 trustees occupied chairs near the long oak table. Local gentry stood along the walls, drawn by scandal and dressed as though curiosity were duty. Lionel waited at the far end with a stack of blue-edged papers beneath one hand. Clarissa sat behind him in dove-grey silk, composed enough to appear innocent. Alistair took his place beside Rosamund, not before her. He had ordered no guards into the hall. Only 2 estate men remained near the doors to keep passage clear. Mr. Vane arranged the parish registers, the original cream drafts, and Rosamund's brown ledger in 3 precise stacks. The silver dinner bell stood near the clerk's place. It looked complete. No one else knew it was not. Agnes Pike rose before the clerk could call the meeting to order. She held one of the false schedules, its corners softened by weeks of handling. "Your Grace," she said to Rosamund, "this says the bakehouse closes today." Her voice did not tremble. "It says winter flour will be reduced. It says 3 rents will rise before Christmas." Every face turned toward Rosamund. "None of those decisions came from me," she said. "Then why is your title beneath them?" a farmer demanded. "Because someone used it." Lionel stood. A convenient answer. He spoke with the measured gravity of a man presenting himself as reluctant rather than eager. "The estate has been asked to accept that every unfavorable record bearing Her Grace's name is false, while every beneficial one was secretly hers. That is not evidence. It is vanity arranged as defense." A few members of the gentry murmured approval. Rosamund did not answer him. She looked at Agnes instead. "You asked about the bakehouse. It remains open." "By whose authority?" "Mine, supported by the parish copy and confirmed by His Grace." Agnes looked toward Alistair. Rosamund took a card from the writing case and wrote, "Confirm the present order only. Do not answer for me." She passed it to Vane, who handed it to Alistair. He read the instruction and faced the room. "The bakehouse remains open. The flour allowance remains unchanged. No disputed rent will rise until the original papers are examined." Lionel gave a slight smile. "Then let us examine them." He placed the first blue-edged slip before the trustees. It recorded a recommendation to reduce winter flour by half and attributed the proposal to Rosamund. The second ordered the bakehouse subsidy ended. The third increased rents in the southern holdings. Each bore dates, initials, and formal closing language. 3 meetings, Lionel said. 3 measures, all entered by the estate clerk. Mr. Ames, a young man seated beside Vane, looked pale. I copied what I was given, my lord. By whom? Rosamund asked. The final slips came to me the morning after each consultation. Who delivered them? Ames glanced toward Clarissa. Lady Clarissa sometimes gathered the rough notes. Clarissa lifted her chin. I arranged papers left carelessly on tables. I did not compose policy. Rosamund opened the first parish register. Reverend Hale read the entry for January 12th. The rector stood. Winter flower allowance to remain unchanged through February. Proposed by Rosamund, Duchess of Hawkridge. Witnessed by the rector and 2 parish officers. He read the date and signatures. Vane placed the blue-edged slip beside it. The dates differed by 1 day. The policy was reversed. The name remained Rosamund's. The same pattern followed with the bakehouse. The parish copy preserved the subsidy. The later blue slip closed it. Lionel folded his arms. Parish entries can also be mistaken. Yes, Rosamund said, which is why no single record should decide the truth. She placed her private ledger before the trustees, but kept one hand on it. This contains dates, witnesses, and locations of copies. It does not ask to be believed without support. Lionel leaned forward. A ledger written by the accused after suspicion arose proves only that she can organize a defense. Then do not rely upon it. Rosamund closed the book. The response unsettled him. She turned to the tenants. You should not trust me, because I am a duchess. You should examine what existed before these schedules appeared. The oldest trustee, Lord Ainsley, adjusted his spectacles and compared the parish register with the blue slips. The wording of the final entry is unusually formal, he said. It appears copied from an established template. Rosamund looked toward the silver dinner bell. Mr. Ames, what closing phrase do you enter when a formal estate consultation ends? The silver dinner bell sounded. Meeting concluded. Read the closing line from the disputed slips. Ames did so. Each contained the same sentence. Bell sounded. Meeting concluded. Rosamund reached into her reticule. The ivory clapper lay warm from her hand. She placed it on the oak table. The tiny object made no sound, yet the hall quieted. This was removed from the silver dinner bell on September 30th last year, she said. It has remained in my possession ever since. Lionel's gaze sharpened. Clarissa's fingers stopped moving over her fan. Rosamund continued. The bell has not sounded at any consultation dated after that evening. Vane lifted the bell and moved it gently. The metal shell swung without a note. A murmur spread across the benches. Lord Ainsley examined the disputed slips again. Then the closing line was copied from an earlier form. Yes, Rosamund said, by someone who did not know the bell had been made silent. Agnes Pike stared at the clapper, so the meetings written here did not happen as recorded. At minimum, the minutes were reconstructed after the fact, Vane said. Lionel's voice cut across him. A copied phrase does not prove the Duchess did not recommend the measures. No, Rosamund replied. It proves these minutes cannot be trusted as original records. Alistair rose. He had remained silent because Rosamund required it. Now he looked first at her, seeking permission without words. She gave one small nod. I knew the bell no longer sounded, he said. I did not ask why the same closing language continued in the minutes. That failure is mine. Lionel turned toward him. Alistair, this is not the moment for marital guilt. It is the moment for accuracy. Alistair looked at the tenants. No disputed measure will be enforced. Relief moved through the hall, but the atmosphere did not settle. The farmer from the road stood. That protects us today. It doesn't prove who wrote the lies. You are right, Rosamund said. She turned to Ames. Bring forward the original rough drafts. The clerk went to the archive chest near the wall. He opened it, searched the marked bundles, then searched again. One is missing. Vane stepped closer. Which one? The first rent schedule. Lionel's expression remained composed. Perhaps the steward removed it. Vane stiffened. I did not. The local magistrate, seated beside the rector, rose from his chair. No one leaves until the missing draft is found. The words changed the meeting. Tenants leaned forward. Servants checked writing tables and document boxes. Vane emptied his leather case onto the table. Maps, sealing wax, letters, and pencils scattered across the wood. Nothing appeared. An estate man searched the side table where Vane had left his coat. As he lifted it, a folded blue-edged sheet slipped from the inner pocket and fell to the floor. No one spoke. The magistrate picked it up and unfolded it. The missing draft. Vane stared at the page. I have never seen that paper. Lionel's voice was quiet. Yet it was in your coat. The crowd erupted into whispers. Someone near the rear called for Vane to answer. Clarissa lowered her eyes as though distressed by the spectacle. Rosamund looked at the steward. His shock was genuine. So was the evidence in the magistrate's hand. Alistair's posture changed. She saw the old fear return before he spoke. Disorder, public accusation. A need to act before the room escaped him. Mr. Vane is suspended from duty until the magistrate has examined the matter. Alistair said, he will remain at the estate lodge and be treated with respect. Rosamund turned toward him sharply. He saw the warning in her face. For one moment he hesitated. A necessary precaution. That was enough to harden the decision. The magistrate nodded. Until the timeline is established. Vane gathered himself with painful dignity. Your Grace, I swear I did not place that paper in my coat. Rosamund believed him. Alistair looked at her, but she did not write. She did not speak. The same man who had begun to understand her had chosen fear before examination once again. As Vane was escorted from the hall, Agnes Pike looked from the silent bell to the steward's empty chair. So the record lied, she said, and now the man who found the lie stands accused. No one answered. Lionel rested one hand on his silver hawk-headed cane. Rosamund saw the gesture. Across the table, Clarissa watched Vane leave without surprise. The ivory clapper remained between Rosamund and Alistair, proof that one false record had been exposed, and another accusation had already taken its place. Rosamund did not follow Alistair when the great hall emptied. She went first to the estate lodge with Lady Sybil, and the ivory clapper closed inside her reticule. Mr. Vane sat in the front parlour beneath the watch of two estate men. His coat lay folded on a chair, the inner pocket turned outward, as though the garment itself had betrayed him. He rose when Rosamund entered. Your Grace, I swear I never saw that draft before it fell from my coat. Sit down, Rosamund said. Begin with the hour you arrived at the hall. Vane obeyed. He had entered before 8, left his coat on a peg in the west passage, carried the parish registers inside, returned once for sealing wax, and put the coat on shortly before the search. Who passed through the west passage? Rosamund asked. Servants, parish officers, Lord Lionel's footman, Lady Clarissa. Lady Sybil leaned forward. Did anyone touch the coat? Vane pressed his fingers to his brow. Lady Clarissa asked for the archive key. I told her it was in my inner pocket. She reached toward the coat. but I removed the key myself." Rosamund and Sybil exchanged a glance. Clarissa knew precisely which pocket Vane used. "Where were you when the missing rent draft was supposedly written?" Rosamund asked. "At St. Anne's vestry." "For how long?" "From shortly after 6 until nearly 10. "Who saw you?" "Reverend Hale, both churchwardens and Mrs. Holt. We were examining the coal accounts." The timeline was simple. The disputed draft had been copied at Alderwick after 7. Vane could not have prepared it. Rosamund turned to one of the estate men. "Tell His Grace that Mr. Vane's account can be confirmed at St. Anne's. Until then, the lodge door remains unlocked, and no one questions him without a witness." The man hesitated. "His Grace ordered that Mr. Vane remain here pending the magistrate's examination." Rosamund removed the estate keys from her waist. She placed them on the small table beside Vane's coat. "Then tell His Grace I will no longer act through courtesy where authority is used before truth." Lady Sybil's breath caught, but Rosamund continued. "He has 2 choices. He may formally acknowledge my permanent place in all consultations concerning rents, leases, parish relief, and village petitions, or I will establish a separate residence under my own income." Vane looked up sharply. The estate man stared at the keys. Rosamund removed her wedding ring next. The pale mark beneath it looked more intimate than the gold itself. She set the ring beside the keys. "Take both to the Duke. Your Grace, I cannot carry such a message. You can repeat words accurately." The man gathered the objects with visible discomfort and left. Alistair received them in his study less than 15 minutes later. The keys struck the desk first. The ring made almost no sound. He stared at both, while the estate man delivered Rosamund's conditions. Every instinct trained into him demanded resistance. The household was unsettled. Tenants had watched a steward accused in public. Lionel had already requested a private discussion. Clarissa had sent word that Rosamund was acting from agitation. Alistair recognized the pattern before he obeyed it. Fear, then control, then an explanation offered as duty. He took the card Rosamund had given him after the Christmas supper from the lock drawer where he had kept it. Understanding begins when explanation ends. He rang for his horse instead of Lionel. The ride to St. Anne's took less than 20 minutes. Reverend Hale confirmed Vane had been at the vestry until 10. Both churchwardens gave the same account. Mrs. Holt produced the coal ledger bearing Vane's notes and initials at half-hour intervals. The evidence was not hidden. Alistair had simply failed to seek it before acting. Reverend Hale closed the book. "Your Grace, Mr. Vane has served this estate faithfully for 14 years." "I know. Then why was he suspended before anyone asked where he had been?" The question was respectfully spoken and impossible to avoid. Alistair looked at the rector. "Because I allowed public disorder to frighten me into choosing speed over justice." Hale's expression softened only slightly. "Then I hope the correction is as public as the mistake." "It will be." Alistair returned to Alderwick by the village road. Several tenants still stood near the hall gates. Agnes Pike was among them. He stopped his horse. "Mr. Vane's account has been confirmed," he said. "He could not have prepared the missing draft. His suspension was my error." The words travelled through the small group. No one praised him for admitting it. That was proper. He had not performed courage. He had corrected an injustice he created. At the estate lodge, Rosamund stood beside the unlit fireplace while Vane waited. Alistair entered without escort and removed his gloves. "Mr. Vane, Reverend Hale, both churchwardens and Mrs. Holt have confirmed your presence at St. Anne's on the night the draft was written." Vane rose. Yes, Your Grace, you could not have prepared it. I suspended you before examining the time. Alistair faced him fully. I was wrong. The two estate men heard. Lady Sybil heard. Rosamund heard. You are restored to your duties immediately. For the household officers tomorrow morning, I will state that the accusation was planted and that I acted without sufficient inquiry. Vane's shoulders remained stiff. Thank you, Your Grace. Do not thank me for repairing what I damaged. Alistair turned toward Rosamund. He held the keys and ring in his open palm. I accept your condition concerning estate consultations. She looked at Lady Sybil rather than at him. Please ask whether the arrangement remains if I choose to live elsewhere. Sybil repeated the question. Alistair answered without hesitation. Yes. Rosamund's gaze returned to him. Ask whether he will preserve my income without requiring reconciliation. Yes, Alistair said before Sybil finished. Your income, residence, and authority will not depend upon forgiveness. Rosamund did not reach for the ring. Alistair closed his fingers around it carefully. I am not asking you to take this back. Something in her face changed. Not trust, recognition of restraint. The keys, she said to Sybil. Alistair placed them in Rosamund's hand. He kept the ring because she had not asked for it. The arrangement will be written before the trustees, he said. Every consultation concerning rents, leases, relief, and village petitions will require your presence or that of a representative you appoint. Rosamund wrote on a card and handed it directly to Lady Sybil. Her Grace asks whether you will surrender custody of the disputed records. Yes, Alistair said. They will remain in her iron box. I will not open it without her permission. Rosamund gave one small nod. Vane moved toward his coat, then stopped. Your Grace, he addressed Rosamund, there is something else. What? Lady Clarissa keeps duplicate council drafts in the old music cabinet. Lady Sybil frowned. How do you know? Last spring, she asked me to carry a packet there after Lord Lionel left. She said they were household copies. I saw blue edges beneath the ribbon. Rosamund's attention sharpened. Who holds the key? Lady Clarissa. Alistair looked toward the west wing. The old music room had been opened only briefly, in April. When Rosamund played the sonata, he had never heard to its end. Since then, Clarissa had insisted the room remain closed because the damp might damage the instrument. Now the reason appeared less innocent. We open it tonight, Alistair said. Rosamund's expression hardened. She wrote quickly. Not tonight. Not without independent witnesses and a locksmith. Alistair read the card after Sybil passed it to him. The old instinct rose again. Delay could allow evidence to disappear. Authority could solve that. He forced the instinct down. Tomorrow morning, he said. With the rector, Mr. Vane, Mrs. Bell, and the locksmith, I will remain outside unless invited. Clarissa appeared in the lodge doorway before anyone could answer. She wore a dark travelling cloak, though no carriage waited for her. Her gaze moved first to Vane's restored coat, then to the keys in Rosamund's hand. What is this? Alistair faced her. Mr. Vane has been cleared. So quickly? The timeline was simple. Clarissa looked at Rosamund, and now she has persuaded you to hand over the estate. Rosamund did not respond. Alistair did. No, she persuaded me to stop mistaking fear for proof. Clarissa's composure thinned. You will regret appearing governed by your wife. I regret that I was not willing to be corrected by her. Her eyes flashed. The music cabinet is private. The room went silent. No one had mentioned it in her presence. Rosamund watched the realization cross Clarissa's face. Too late. Clarissa drew herself taller. It contains family correspondence. Then the witnesses will preserve anything unrelated to estate matters, Alistair said. You have no right. Rosamund took a card but did not write. She simply looked at Clarissa until the other woman understood that denial had become confirmation. Clarissa turned and left without bowing. Outside, her footsteps struck the stone passage too quickly for dignity. Vane looked toward Rosamund. She may try to remove the papers. Mrs. Bell will seal the music room door, Rosamund said. 2 servants will remain in the passage until morning. Alistair waited for her to object to his presence. She did not. He bowed once and moved toward the door. Rosamund. She looked at him but offered no voice. He held up the wedding ring in his palm. I will keep this only until you decide where it belongs. Then he left the lodge. Rosamund stood with the estate keys in one hand and the ivory clapper in the other. The ring was gone from her finger. Vane was free. The cabinet would open at dawn. For the first time since the forged petition appeared, the next truth no longer belonged to whoever controlled the room. At dawn, the old music room door still bore Mrs. Bell's wax seal, unbroken across the keyhole. 2 senior footmen stood in the passage, pale from a sleepless watch. Rosamund arrived with Lady Sybil, Mr. Vane, Reverend Hale, Mrs. Bell, and the village locksmith. Alistair waited several feet away beneath the window, exactly where he had promised to remain. Clarissa came last. She wore a dark green morning gown and an expression composed so carefully that it revealed more than agitation would have done. This is an outrage, she said. A private cabinet is being opened before servants. Rosamund looked at Reverend Hale. Please record that Lady Clarissa objects. The rector opened a small book. Recorded. Clarissa's gaze snapped toward Rosamund. You have learned to enjoy ceremony. Rosamund did not answer. Mrs. Bell examined the wax seal, declared it untouched, and broke it before the witnesses. The locksmith opened the outer door, then moved toward the rosewood cabinet beside the pianoforte. Its narrow lock resisted him for several minutes. No one spoke. The silence gave Clarissa too much time to watch the instrument Rosamund had once played and Alistair had failed to hear. When the lock finally yielded, the cabinet opened with a dry click. 3 shelves stood inside. The first held old music folios. The second held household correspondence tied in grey ribbon. The lowest contained packets wrapped in cream paper, each marked by a thin blue edge. Vane drew a breath. Those are the copies I carried. Rosamund stepped forward. No one removes anything until the contents are described. Reverend Hale recorded each packet as Mrs. Bell placed it on a cloth-covered table. Alistair remained outside the threshold. He could see Rosamund's profile, the stillness of her shoulders, and Clarissa's hand tightening around her gloves. Rosamund opened the first packet. It contained the original cream draft concerning winter coal. Her formal signature appeared at the bottom. A black line had been drawn through it. Above the erased name, someone had written Lord Lionel Harcourt. The second packet held the Widow Cottage proposal. Again, Rosamund's name had been struck out and Lionel's inserted. The third contained the bakehouse recommendation. Its original language preserved the subsidy through winter. The blue-edged replacement reversed the decision and attributed the closure to Rosamund. Vane looked toward Clarissa. You said these were household duplicates. They are duplicates, Clarissa replied. DPs do not usually contradict the original. Presentation changes. Policy remains. The policy did not remain, Rosamund said. Clarissa's attention shifted to her. Must every practical choice become a monument to you? Rosamund lifted the cold draught. This is not about praise. No, Clarissa's composure thinned. You arrived at Alderwick, and within weeks expected to be consulted on rents, roads, coal, servants, tenants, menus, invitations, and parish business. You behaved as though marriage had made you indispensable. Marriage made me Duchess. A title is not experience. Then, why did you use my recommendations? The question landed cleanly. Clarissa looked toward the cabinet. Rosamund continued. If my judgment was inexperienced, why preserve every decision that worked? Clarissa's mouth tightened. Because the decisions were useful. But my name was not. Your name complicated them. Lady Sybil stared at her. How? Clarissa turned toward Alistair in the corridor. Because a duke who appears corrected by his wife becomes a subject of ridicule. I protected this house from that. Alistair did not enter. By making Rosamund appear cruel, he asked, by preventing society from believing you were governed. You stole her credit. I controlled presentation. Rosamund held up the blue-edged replacement and attached my name to cruelty. Clarissa's voice sharpened. I did not prepare the rent schedules. Did you know Lionel intended to? No. Did you know he used blue-edged paper? Everyone in the household knew. Did you know he had access to my private letters? Clarissa hesitated. He saw correspondence left in the morning room. Because you gave it to him? Because he asked what influence you were attempting to build. The room went still. Rosamund placed the paper down. You gave Lionel my letters. I showed him enough to understand your ambition, and he learned how I signed private correspondence. Clarissa's face altered by a fraction. The implication had reached her. I did not know he would forge anything. You knew enough to provide the hand he copied. Reverend Hale recorded the admission. Clarissa looked at him sharply. That was not a confession. It was a statement made before witnesses, he replied. Mrs. Bell removed a final envelope from the cabinet. It contained 3 short notes in Clarissa's hand. One instructed that Rosamund's name be removed from a county relief committee. Another advised placing Lionel beside Alistair at every estate supper. The third read, better that Hawkridge appear guided by trusted male counsel than dependent upon a wife still learning her place. Beneath it, in a darker hand Rosamund recognized as Lionel's, appeared one added line. Her labor is useful. Her authority is not. Sybil looked at Clarissa with open disgust. That is what you believed. Clarissa lifted her chin. I believed Alderwick required order. You believed Rosamund should work without being seen, Sybil said. You wished to keep the labor of a duchess and deny the authority of one. Rosamund did not need to add anything. The truth had been named. Vane searched the cabinet's bottom panel and found a narrow receipt pressed beneath the wood. It came from a Winchester stationer. 24 sheets of blue-edged paper. Hawk watermark, charged to L. Harcourt. Alistair entered the room only when Rosamund looked toward him and gave permission with a small motion of her hand. He crossed the threshold slowly. Vane handed him the receipt. This connects Lord Lionel to the paper, he said. Not yet to the forged language or the payments, but enough to establish access, Reverend Hale said. Clarissa's face had lost color. Lionel ordered stationery. That is hardly criminal. No, Rosamund said, but it is one part of a design. She gathered the cream drafts, the blue replacements, Clarissa's notes, and the stationer's receipt. These will be sealed in the iron box. Alistair looked at the ivory clapper in her hand. She had taken it from her reticule before entering. For a moment, she held it between them. Then she placed it in his palm. The contact lasted less than a second. keep this with the evidence," she said to Reverend Hale, not to Alistair. The rector repeated the instruction. Alistair closed his fingers around the ivory. "I will hold it only until the box is sealed." Rosamund nodded. He did not treat the gesture as trust restored. Clarissa watched them with something more personal than fear. "You are allowing her to dismantle every relationship that protected you," she told Alistair. He looked at her. "A relationship built upon erasing my wife did not protect me. You will regret being seen as governed." "I regret being governed by the fear of that appearance." Clarissa's eyes hardened. "Then you have learned nothing about society." Rosamund answered before anyone else. "No, he has learned the cost of letting society decide whose voice is permitted." Clarissa looked at her as though the words were an intrusion into a room she still owned. "You think this makes you mistress of Alderwick?" "No, it proves I was never merely a guest in it." Mrs. Bell sealed the evidence packets into the iron box before the witnesses. Rosamund kept the key. Alistair placed the clapper inside only after she opened the lid herself. As the lock turned, a messenger arrived from the courtyard carrying a formal letter addressed to the Duke and the trustees of Hawkridge. The paper bore Lionel's seal. Alistair broke it and read in silence. "What is it?" Sybil asked. He handed the letter to Rosamund. Lionel had requested a special meeting of estate trustees within 7 days. He claimed the Duchess's prolonged refusal to communicate with her husband, fixation upon records, and public contradiction of male officers raised serious concerns about her fitness to influence estate decisions. He also requested that Dr. Wetherell, who had observed her in society, provide an opinion. Clarissa looked toward the floor. Rosamund read the letter twice. Lionel had failed to stop the evidence from being found, so he had changed the question. The issue would no longer be whether the records were false. It would be whether the woman exposing them was fit to be believed. Alistair's voice was low. "I can refuse the meeting." Rosamund took a card from her reticule. "If you refuse it, he will say the evidence could not survive examination." Vane read the message aloud. "Then I will stand beside you," Alistair said. Rosamund wrote again. "You will sit where I place you. You will not answer for me." He read the card himself. "Agreed." Clarissa gave a bitter laugh. "You are truly letting her direct this." Alistair looked at Rosamund, then at the sealed box. "No, I am refusing to direct what belongs to her." Rosamund folded Lionel's letter and placed it beside the evidence. 7 days remained before the trustees assembled. For nearly a year, others had used her silence to write a false version of her. Now Lionel intended to place that false woman before the estate and ask powerful men to declare her real. Alistair could have ended Lionel's challenge before breakfast. One order would have cancelled the trustees' meeting. Another would have sent Lionel from Alderwick and forbidden Dr. Wetherell from entering the estate. The authority existed. That was precisely why Alistair did not use it. Rosamund sat across from him in the small library with Lady Sybil and Mr. Vane. The sealed iron box rested on the table between them. Lionel's letter lay beside it. Alistair remained standing because Rosamund had not invited him to sit. "I can refuse the meeting," he said. Rosamund took out a card. "If you refuse it, Lionel will claim the evidence cannot survive examination." Vane read the sentence aloud. "Then I will chair it," Alistair said. Rosamund wrote again. "If you speak for me, they will say I was protected because I am your wife, not vindicated because I am right." Alistair looked at the card after Vane placed it before him. "What do you require?" Rosamund answered through writing, one condition at a time. She would lay the papers before the trustees. She would decide the order in which witnesses spoke. Principal tenants from all 3 villages would be present. Reverend Hale would keep an independent record. The estate solicitor and local magistrate would attend as witnesses to the proceedings. Alistair would not interrupt her, correct her, or answer any question directed to her. If she questioned him about the dinner where the silence began, he would answer plainly. He would not invoke marriage, succession, or the need for an heir as reasons she owed him obedience. Alistair read each condition without bargaining. Agreed. Rosamund wrote one final sentence. My place in estate consultations must be secured before the meeting, not promised afterward. Alistair opened the leather folder he had brought. It has been. He placed a folded instrument on the table. The document bore his seal, the signatures of 2 trustees, and the attestation of the estate solicitor. It stated that every future consultation concerning rents, leases, parish relief, grazing rights, bakehouse support, or village petitions must include Rosamund, Duchess of Hawkridge, or a representative appointed by her in writing. No measure in those matters could be entered into the estate book without her review. The provision remained valid whether she resided at Alderwick or maintained a separate household. Her personal income would continue without condition. Rosamund read every line. Her expression did not soften, but her fingers paused at the sentence concerning separate residence. She handed the instrument to Lady Sybil. Keep 1 copy with the Ellery papers. Sybil nodded. Alistair waited. Rosamund did not thank him. She was not required to thank a man for securing rights he should never have denied. The 2nd copy will remain with Reverend Hale, Alistair said. The 3rd will be entered in the estate book. Rosamund looked at Vane. Tell his grace the arrangement is acceptable. Vane repeated the words. Alistair inclined his head. Then we proceed. Preparation took place over the next 3 days, but Rosamund allowed no endless rehearsals. The evidence was divided into 4 groups only: original parish copies, altered blue-edged slips, the ivory clapper and the false closing phrases, the stationer's receipt and payment trail connecting Lionel's household accounts to the printed schedules and the men who had been bribed. Clarissa's notes would establish motive and social erasure, but they would not be treated as proof of the rent fraud. Dr. Wetherell's opinion would be answered by showing what he had never examined. Rosamund rejected every paper that added outrage without adding fact. We do not need to prove they were unkind, she told Sybil. We need to prove what they did. Alistair attended only after asking permission through Vane. He sat at the far end of the table and learned the discipline of being present without taking control. When Rosamund paused over a document, he did not fill the silence. When her hand moved toward a paper, he did not reach first because his arm was longer. When Vane asked a question, Alistair waited to see whether Rosamund wished to answer. The restraint looked small from outside. To Alistair, it felt like rebuilding every instinct he had once mistaken for authority. On the 2nd evening, Vane brought an old seating book from the great hall. Folded inside was a note in Lionel's hand. Place Hawkridge between trustees and tenants. Let every question pass through him. Seat the Duchess below the principal table. Control the room, and the room will decide what truth is permitted to enter. Alistair read the note twice. Lionel had understood him too well. A year earlier, Alistair would have accepted the arrangement without noticing its purpose. Remove my ceremonial chair, he said. Rosamund looked toward Vane. Tell his grace that his place must remain visible. Otherwise, Lionel will say he was excluded. Vane repeated the message. Alistair considered it. Then place me at your right hand, level with the other members, without a bell and without a raised chair. Rosamund wrote on a card, "That is not where a duke is expected to sit." He read the sentence himself. "No, it is where this duke must sit." She studied him for a moment, then altered the plan. Her chair moved to the center of the oak table. His stood beside it, equal in height. Trustees would sit to the left, principal tenants to the right. Reverend Hale and the solicitor would remain at the end with the record books. No person would need to look past Alistair to see Rosamund. That night, rain moved softly across Alderwick's windows. Rosamund remained in the morning room after Lady Sybil retired. Before her lay Lionel's letter and the private opinion Dr. Wetherell had sent in advance. The physician had never examined her. His conclusions rested on Lionel's description of prolonged silence, unusual attention to records, resistance to marital authority, and public contradiction of male officers. Every act of self-protection had been translated into illness. Alistair stopped outside the open door, carrying a tea tray himself. He did not enter. "May I leave this inside?" Rosamund looked at him, then gave one small nod. He crossed only far enough to set the tray on a side table. Beside the teapot lay a folded sheet, not sealed. "You do not have to read that," he said. "It is not an apology." Rosamund waited until he stepped back before opening it. The page held questions, not explanations. What music did you love before you came to Alderwick? What did you hope marriage would become after duty was satisfied? What frightened you when you first entered this house? What makes you laugh when no one is watching? What part of yourself did you stop offering because I taught you it would not be received? Rosamund read the final line twice. Alistair remained near the door. "I should have asked those questions before I asked anything of you." She folded the page and placed it beside Lionel's letter. He did not ask for an answer. "You have eaten very little," he said. "The tea is plain. Mrs. Bell said you preferred it that way after 9. Rosamund looked at the cup. It was a small fact. Once he would not have known it. Now he knew because he had asked someone and remembered. She took up a card and wrote slowly, "Tomorrow, answer me before everyone." Alistair read the sentence when she held it out. He understood what she was preserving. Nearly a year had passed since she had spoken directly to him. She would not spend her first words on reassurance, gratitude, or private tenderness. She would use them where his cruelty had begun, before witnesses. "I will answer," he said. Rosamund wrote again. "Without defending yourself." "Yes, even if the answer costs the marriage." Alistair's breath changed, but his voice did not, especially then. He left the room without touching the tea, the letter, or the hand that still bore no ring. At dawn, servants prepared the great hall. The raised ducal chair was removed. The silver dinner bell was placed before Rosamund's seat, its empty body polished until it looked capable of sound. The ivory clapper remained sealed inside the iron box. Alistair entered after the arrangements were complete. He found Rosamund alone at the center of the long table, reviewing the first parish register. His chair stood at her right, level with hers. "Do you want me here?" he asked. Rosamund looked at the empty seat, then nodded. Alistair sat. He folded his hands and waited. Outside, carriage wheels crossed the courtyard as trustees, tenants, the rector, the solicitor, the magistrate, Clarissa, Lionel, and Dr. Wetherell began to arrive. Rosamund opened the estate book to a clean page. Alistair looked at the silent bell between them and understood that the next sound she gave him would not be mercy. It would be judgment. The first carriage reached Alderwick before the hall clock struck 9. By 1/2 the hour, every chair had been taken. The 3 estate trustees sat to Rosamund's left. Principal tenants from St. Anne's and the neighbouring villages occupied the benches opposite them. Reverend Hale stood near the end of the oak table with the parish registers. Mr. Vane arranged 4 sealed groups of papers beside the iron box. The estate solicitor sat near the local magistrate, both present to witness rather than command. Lady Sybil took her place behind Rosamund. Mrs. Bell and 2 senior servants remained near the doors. Clarissa entered in grey silk and stopped when she saw the altered seating. There was no raised ducal chair. Alistair sat at Rosamund's right in a chair equal to hers. The silver dinner bell stood before Rosamund, polished but silent. Lionel arrived last, leaning upon his silver hawk-headed cane, as though the room still belonged to him. Dr. Wetherell followed with a leather case and the air of a man accustomed to being believed before speaking. Lionel looked at Rosamund's central position and gave a thin smile, an unusual arrangement. Rosamund opened the estate book. It allows every person present to see the papers directly and allows the subject of concern to direct the meeting. Rosamund looked toward Reverend Hale. "Please enter Lord Lionel's objection." Hale dipped his pen, entered. Lionel's expression tightened. He turned to Alistair. "Surely you do not intend to permit this?" Alistair folded his hands and remained seated. "The Duchess will lay the matter before the trustees, under authority granted by you, under an instrument signed before this meeting and witnessed by 2 trustees and the estate solicitor." The oldest trustee, Lord Ainsley, lifted his hand. "That is correct." Lionel glanced toward the tenants. "Then let the record show that the Duke has surrendered judgment before judgment has been tested." Rosamund did not answer. She motioned to Vane. He placed 3 documents on the table. The first guaranteed her personal income. The second allowed her to maintain a separate residence without surrendering her place in estate consultations. The third required her presence or written representative in all future matters concerning rents, leases, relief, grazing rights, bakehouse support, and village petitions. Alistair had signed each one. Rosamund placed her wedding ring beside the silent bell. The movement drew every eye. "These provisions were executed before today," she said to the room. "They do not depend upon the outcome of this meeting or upon whether I remain in my marriage." Clarissa's composure cracked for one brief second. Lionel recovered faster. A dramatic precaution. Rosamund looked at him. A necessary one. No woman can speak freely if every truth risks her home. The tenants grew still. Agnes Pike watched the ring more closely than the papers. Rosamund turned first to Dr. Wetherell. "Doctor, Lord Lionel submitted your written opinion regarding my fitness to influence estate decisions." "A preliminary opinion," he said, "based on observation and information supplied to me. Have you ever examined me?" "Not formally. Informally? No. Have you spoken with me for more than a few minutes?" "I have encountered you in society." "How many times?" Wetherell shifted. "Twice. Did Lord Lionel tell you I spoke normally with tenants, servants, parish officers, guests, and members of my family?" He described the behavior as selective. "Did he tell you when it began?" "He said it followed marital discord." "Did he tell you what was said to me?" Wetherell glanced toward Alistair. "No." "Did he tell you I continued estate work, parish relief, household management, and public petitions during the same period?" "Not in detail." Rosamund lifted his letter. "You wrote that." Prolonged silence, unusual attention to records, and resistance to marital authority suggested instability. Those factors can be concerning. If they are examined, yes. But you did not examine me. The physician's confidence faltered. No, you accepted one man's account of a woman he wished declared unfit. Lionel leaned forward. That is a distortion. Rosamund continued, without looking at him. Doctor, had you known that disputed records bearing my name were later proved inconsistent, would attention to those records still appear irrational? Wetherell looked at the blue-edged slips. No. Had you known I spoke to everyone except the husband who publicly dismissed my voice, would selective silence alone prove incapacity? No. Then your opinion was not based upon my condition. It was based upon incomplete information arranged to resemble one. Dr. Wetherell lowered his eyes. That would be fair. Rosamund handed the letter to Reverend Hale. Enter it as a private opinion unsupported by examination. Hale recorded the words. Lionel tapped his cane once against the floor. Even without the physician's letter, the estate still faces altered records and an estranged Duchess who has gathered evidence in private. Rosamund turned to Vane. He opened the first packet. The original parish copies were laid before the trustees. Each showed the true recommendation before the blue-edged forms appeared. Winter flower preserved. Bakehouse subsidy continued. No rent increase authorized. Reverend Hale read the dates and witnesses. The estate solicitor confirmed the entries had been made before the false schedules were printed. The second packet held the altered slips. Rosamund did not recite every line. She selected one pair. In the parishess record, her name appeared beneath the preserved flower allowance. In the altered slip, Lionel received credit for the same decision. A second slip reversed the bakehouse recommendation and placed Rosamund's title beneath it. Lord Ainsley examined both. The pattern is plain. Lionel replied. The pattern proves clerical confusion, not conspiracy. Rosamund opened the iron box. She removed the ivory clapper and placed it beside the bell. Then let us examine the clerical language. Mr. Ames, the young clerk, was called forward. What phrase appears at the close of formal estate consultations? Rosamund asked. The silver dinner bell sounded. Meeting concluded. Read the disputed entries. He did. Each ended with the same sentence. Rosamund lifted the bell and moved it gently. No sound came. This clapper was removed on September 30th last year. It has remained in my custody since that evening. Vane confirmed he had seen the silent bell at every consultation afterward. Mrs. Bell confirmed the household had never replaced the missing piece. Alistair spoke only when Rosamund looked toward him. I knew the bell could not sound, he said. I failed to question why the same phrase continued in the minutes. Lionel's face hardened. A copied phrase proves carelessness. It proves the records were reconstructed from an older form, Rosamund said. It proves they were not written as the meetings occurred. Murmurs moved through the tenant benches. Agnes Pike folded her hands tightly. Rosamund signalled Vane to open the third packet. Clarissa's notes and the original cream drafts were placed before the trustees. The crossed-out signatures required no lengthy explanation. Good measures had been detached from Rosamund and attached to Lionel. Harmful measures had been attached to Rosamund without original support. Clarissa rose. I altered presentation, not policy. You removed my name, Rosamund said, because Hawkridge could not appear governed by a new Duchess. And you gave Lionel access to my private correspondence. Clarissa's face went pale. I showed him letters that revealed your ambitions. They revealed how I signed private notes. Reverend Hale entered the statement. Lionel turned sharply toward Clarissa. She looked away. Vane then opened the final packet. The Winchester stationer's receipt connected Lionel to the blue-edged paper. A household account showed payment to one of Lionel's servants 2 days before Thomas Reed was hired to break the carriage window. The record was not enough by itself. Rosamund knew that. "Call Abel Crow," she said. A tenant near the rear rose slowly and removed his cap. Vane placed the man's rent account before the trustees. £6 of arrears had been erased 3 days after the Michaelmas assembly. "Mr. Crow," Rosamund said, "did you see Mr. Vane place the missing draft in his coat?" Abel looked toward Lionel. "Yes, Your Grace." Vane went still. "Where were you standing?" "In the West Passage." "Who stood beside you?" "No one." "Mrs. Bell, how many servants were in that passage?" "4, Your Grace. 2 footmen, a maid, and the archive boy." "Did any of them see Mr. Crow there?" "No." Abel twisted his cap. Rosamund looked at him, not with softness but with one final measure of mercy. "You may lie once because you are afraid. Reverend Hale has not yet entered your answer as a sworn statement. Speak again before he does." Lionel tapped his cane. Once. Abel heard it. His shoulders collapsed. "Lord Lionel's man came to my cottage," he said. "He promised the rest of my arrears would disappear if I said I saw Mr. Vane with the paper." A low sound moved through the room. Lionel rose. "This is purchased testimony from a debtor." The magistrate spoke for the first time. "Sit down, my lord." Lionel ignored him and looked at Alistair. "You see what she is doing. She is turning tenants against their betters and calling resentment truth." Alistair did not answer. He had given Rosamund that silence. She looked at him now. The hall seemed to wait with her. Nearly 1 year had passed since she had last spoken directly to her husband. The bell between them remained useless. The ring beside it remained unworn. Rosamund closed the estate book and turned fully toward Alistair. Every face followed. Her first words to him would not be private. They would enter the record. "Did you believe I had nothing worth hearing?" Rosamund asked. Her voice did not shake. It crossed the great hall more clearly than the silver bell ever had. Alistair looked at her as though the year between them had narrowed to the space occupied by one question. Every tenant, trustee, servant, and guest waited for the Duke to defend himself. He did not. "Yes," he said. The answer entered the room without shelter. Lionel's expression sharpened with satisfaction. But Rosamund did not look away from her husband. "When?" "At the dinner where this began." Alistair's hands remained open on the table. "I believed duty mattered more than companionship. I believed succession gave me the right to decide which parts of you were useful. I believed your judgment became an inconvenience when it challenged my control." The words cost him. He allowed them to. "Did Lord Lionel teach you that?" Rosamund asked. "He encouraged it. He did not create it." Lionel's satisfaction vanished. Alistair continued. "After the tenant protest, I feared appearing weak. Lionel made certainty feel like strength. Clarissa made your exclusion appear proper. But I chose both comforts. I silenced you before either of them forged a page." No one moved. Reverend Hale's pen scratched softly across the record. Rosamund asked, "Did you create the false schedules?" "No." "Did you order my name removed from beneficial decisions?" "No." "Did your conduct make such theft easier?" Alistair met her gaze. "Yes." Clarissa closed her eyes. Lionel struck the floor once with his cane. "This confession has no bearing on whether the Duchess is fit to govern." Rosamund turned to him. "It explains why you believed no one would question records that made me appear unfit. You are mistaking marital remorse for evidence. Then we will return to evidence. She faced Alistair again. When you suspended Mr. Vane, what guided you? Fear. Not fact? No. And when you corrected yourself? I examined the time, sought witnesses, and admitted the error publicly. Rosamund held his gaze. If I leave Alderwick, does my place in estate consultations remain? Yes. If I maintain a separate residence? Yes. If I never forgive you? Alistair's breath changed, but his answer did not. Yes. Will you claim my staying as proof that what you did was justified? No. Will you invoke the need for an heir to compel reconciliation? Never again. The room seemed to release a breath. Rosamund's first direct words to him had not restored intimacy. They had established truth. Lionel rose. Hawkridge requires continuity, an heir, authority that does not tremble whenever a woman finds offence in plain speech. Agnes Pike stood from the tenant bench. Plain speech? She said. You printed lies beneath her name. Lionel ignored her. The estate cannot be governed by wounded pride and parish gossip. Rosamund lifted the original coal draft. You called my judgment unfit. She placed the altered copy beside it. Why did you take credit for it? Lionel's mouth tightened. Because the measure was sound. And the widow cottages, also sound. The grazing decision, practical. Then my mind became valuable whenever my name disappeared. He leaned toward her. Your ideas could be used without allowing the estate to appear ruled by domestic influence. My labor was useful. My authority was not. Rosamund repeated the sentence from his note. Lionel's face hardened. That is the natural order. Lord Ainsley removed his spectacles. No natural order requires forgery. The magistrate looked toward Vane. Bring the remaining account. Vane placed a narrow household ledger on the table. The entry showed payment from Lionel's discretionary fund to his footman 2 days before Thomas Reed was hired. A second line recorded reimbursement to the Winchester printer for blue-edged schedules. Lionel glanced at the page. Routine household expenses. Then your servant can explain them, Rosamund said. The footman waited in the outer chamber. He entered pale and avoided Lionel's gaze. The magistrate asked his name, position, and whether he had carried a silver hawk-headed cane on the village road. Yes, sir. Lionel's voice became quiet. Consider your answer carefully. The magistrate turned toward him. You will not address the witness again. The footman swallowed. Lord Lionel gave me the cane because the handle was recognizable. He said the boy should remember a gentleman's servant, not a face. A stir ran through the hall. Were you told to harm anyone? Rosamund asked. No, your grace. Only to break the carriage glass and frighten you into turning back. Who paid Thomas Reed? I did, from the money in that account. Who delivered the false schedules to the printer? I did. Lionel's composure broke. You contemptible fool. The footman flinched. Rosamund raised one hand. The room obeyed her before Alistair could move. The witness will finish. Did Lord Lionel instruct you to place the missing draft in Mr. Vane's coat? The magistrate asked. Lady Clarissa told me which pocket held the archive key. Lord Lionel told me to use the same pocket. Every eye turned toward Clarissa. She rose slowly. I did not know the draft would be planted. You told him where to place it, Rosamund said. I told Lionel where Vane kept the key. I believed he intended to inspect the archives. Clarissa's voice faltered. I altered names. I removed you from committees. I gave Lionel your private letters. I told myself I was protecting Alistair from ridicule. She looked at Rosamund without superiority for the first time. I knew he used the blue paper. I did not know the full design. You knew enough to ask no questions, Rosamund said. Clarissa lowered her head. Yes. The magistrate closed the account book. The sworn statements, financial entries, forged schedules, and planted document require formal examination. Lord Lionel, you will surrender all Hawkridge papers in your possession and remain available to the county magistracy. Lionel looked at Alistair. You would permit this because your wife has embarrassed you into obedience? Alistair stood. No, I permit it because the evidence condemns you. I preserved your authority. You preserved your influence by feeding my fear. Alistair's voice remained calm. From this moment, you hold no trusteeship, office, patronage, or authority under Hawkridge. You are forbidden from all ducal properties until the magistrate's examination is complete. Lionel gripped the silver hawk atop his cane. You choose her over your own blood. I choose truth over a man who used blood as permission. 2 officers approached. Lionel did not resist. He left the hall beneath the gaze of tenants whose rents he had treated as tools. No one applauded. The silence carried more judgment than celebration could have done. Rosamund turned to Clarissa. You will leave all estate and household committees. You will not enter the archives, offices, servants' passages, or council rooms without permission. Your personal income and residence remain yours. Clarissa looked toward Alistair. He did not rescue her from the consequence. The Duchess's recommendation stands, he said. Clarissa bowed once. I understand. Lord Ainsley rose. The papers show that the Duchess preserved relief, prevented unlawful increases, exposed falsified records, and submitted her own conduct to examination. I move that her place in all estate consultations be confirmed without condition. The other trustees agreed. Reverend Hale entered the decision. Agnes Pike came forward, carrying the original grazing petition from the previous year. She placed it before Rosamund. Then hear us first, she said. Rosamund looked at the woman whose family had nearly lost its cattle and whose trust had been poisoned by another person's ink. I will. Agnes nodded. That was all. Rosamund then addressed the room. The false rent increases are void. The flour allowance remains unchanged. The bakehouse subsidy continues. Every future parish measure will be copied at St. Anne's before it enters the estate book. Relief moved through the benches in lowered shoulders and quiet breaths. Rosamund took her wedding ring from beside the bell. She did not put it on. I will remain at Alderwick for 6 months, she said. Alistair's face stayed controlled, though hope entered his eyes with painful caution. I remain as Duchess, with authority secured in writing. I do not remain as a wife who has granted forgiveness. I understand, he said. Rosamund placed the ivory clapper inside the walnut evidence box and closed the lid. The silver bell remained before her, polished and useless. This meeting is concluded. No one rang it. The hall emptied slowly. Trustees gathered their papers. Tenants carried away corrected notices. Clarissa departed with Lady Sybil beside her, not as friend but as witness to the boundary now imposed. When only Rosamund and Alistair remained near the oak table, he stopped several feet away. Do you want me to leave Alderwick? He asked. Rosamund looked at him across the silent bell. No. The single word struck him more deeply than pardon would have done. She gathered the original petition and held it against her ledger. Tomorrow, you may ask me what I tried to tell you. Then she walked from the hall, leaving Alistair beside the empty chair, the unworn ring, and the first honest hope he had no right to command. The next morning, Alistair found Rosamund in the old map room with the original grazing petition spread across a table beneath the east window. The room had once been his father's private domain. Now the estate maps had been unrolled, corrected, and arranged beside parish copies in Rosamund's hand. Alistair stopped at the threshold. "May I come in?" Rosamund looked toward the empty chair opposite her. Yes, he entered and closed the door without turning the key. For several moments, neither spoke. The silence no longer belonged only to injury. It had become a space in which truth might be chosen carefully. Alistair sat. "What did you try to tell me that night?" Rosamund rested one hand on the grazing petition. Mrs. Pike's cattle could not be moved north because the drainage ditch had collapsed. The map was wrong. If the cattle had been sold, 3 families would have lost milk income and breeding stock before winter. Alistair listened without interrupting. Mr. Vane knew the field was unsafe, but Lionel had taught everyone that disagreement would be called disorder. Mrs. Pike was afraid to sound ungrateful. "I wanted you to hear them before you issued a final order, and I chose not to." Yes, the word did not wound him by force. It entered where defense had once stood. Rosamund looked down at the petition. "But that was not all I wanted to tell you." Alistair remained still. "I wanted to tell you about the music room. I had chosen a Haydn sonata because you once said its restraint sounded honest. I arranged tea for 2 because I thought companionship might be built from small habits before affection came." Her voice remained composed, but the pain beneath it was no longer hidden behind paper. "I wanted to tell you that I was frightened of entering our house, where Clarissa already seemed to know every room better than I did. I wanted to ask what made you laugh when you were not performing certainty for anyone. I wanted to know whether your silence meant discomfort, indifference, or simply exhaustion." Alistair's throat tightened. "It was all 3. You never told me." "No. So I kept offering pieces of myself and watching them remain untouched." Rosamund looked toward the window. "The night you spoke at dinner, I understood that you had not merely refused one conversation. You had decided conversation itself was unnecessary." Alistair lowered his gaze. "I did. My silence was not meant to punish you. I know. It was the only way I could stop offering what you had already declared worthless." The words settled between them. Alistair did not reach for her hand. "What do you want me to understand now?" he asked. Rosamund looked at him again. "That I am not valuable only when I save the estate from a bad decision. I am not valuable only when tenants trust me, or when I find a forged paper, or when I make your household function more smoothly. No, I want to be known when I have solved nothing." Alistair's face changed. "Then I have more to learn than I understood." "Yes, will you let me learn?" Rosamund did not answer immediately. "For 6 months, I will watch what you do when there is no audience." "That is fair. Do not call it fair. Call it the consequence." "Then I will." The 6 months did not transform them through one great promise. They changed through repeated choices. At the first estate consultation after the trustees' meeting, Rosamund began explaining a tenant request concerning mill tolls. Lionel was gone, but the old habit remained in Alistair. He interrupted with a proposed solution before she reached the final detail. The room went quiet. Alistair stopped himself. "I spoke too soon," he said. He turned to Rosamund. "Please finish." She did. Her conclusion differed from his, and after the parish figures were examined, hers proved sounder. Alistair entered the decision under her name in the estate book before every officer present. A month later, Mrs. Bell brought him a household complaint concerning 2 servants accused of neglect. Alistair did not issue an order. He asked whether Rosamund wished to hear the matter jointly. When she said no, he accepted the refusal and asked Mrs. Bell to investigate before judgment. The problem proved to be a damaged bell pull, not negligence. Alistair looked at the silent silver dinner bell in the cabinet and understood the lesson without speaking it aloud. In December, Rosamund returned to the music room. She found Alistair waiting outside. "May I sit in the corridor while you play?" he asked. "You may sit inside." He entered and chose a chair far from the pianoforte. Rosamund began the Haydn sonata she had abandoned in April. Alistair listened through every restrained phrase and did not praise her before the final note faded. When she closed the music, he said, "I understand why you chose it. Do you? It refuses to beg for attention." Rosamund looked at him for a long moment. "That is part of it." He smiled slightly. "Then I still have more to hear." She did not smile back at once. When she finally did, the expression was small and unguarded. It was the first warmth she had given him that did not arise from pity, duty, or relief. Lionel's examination continued through the winter. His offices and patronage remained stripped from him. Several county families withdrew invitations once the sworn statements became known. Clarissa removed to a Harcourt property near Bath. She retained her personal income, but no longer directed committees, correspondence, or household affairs at Alderwick. Rosamund did not ask for humiliation beyond consequence. Mr. Fane resumed his full duties. At Rosamund's request, Alistair issued a household order that no estate officer could be suspended upon one accusation without corroboration from the steward, solicitor, rector, or magistrate. He signed it publicly and named Vane's wrongful suspension as the reason. In March, rain filled the repaired northern drainage ditch and left the grazing field dry. Agnes Pike brought the first spring petition to the map room herself. She addressed Rosamund first. Alistair did not resent it. He moved his chair so the tenant could sit between them. When the 6 months ended, Rosamund asked Alistair to meet her in the map room after dusk. No papers waited on the table. The silver dinner bell had been removed from public use and placed inside a glass-fronted cabinet. The walnut evidence box rested beneath it, open, the ivory clapper visible inside. Rosamund stood near the map of St. Anne's, holding her wedding ring. Alistair stopped several feet away. "You asked once where it belonged," she said. "Yes. It does not belong on my hand because society expects it. No, it does not belong there because you restored my place in estate matters. No, and I will not wear it because you learned to value my usefulness." Alistair met her gaze. "Do you? I want you beside me when you are wise, angry, uncertain, amused, tired, mistaken, or entirely uninterested in estate business. I do not want only the parts of you that improve my decisions." Rosamund's fingers closed around the ring. "And when fear returns, it will return." He did not pretend otherwise. "I cannot promise never to feel the impulse to control what frightens me. I can promise to name it before obeying it. I can ask whether I am protecting you or protecting myself from uncertainty. And if I disagree with you, then disagreement will not become disloyalty. And if I ask to be left alone, I will leave." Rosamund stepped closer and placed the ring in his palm. "Put it on." Alistair looked at her face before touching her hand. "Are you certain?" "I am choosing to try again." He slid the ring onto her finger. He did not kiss her hand until she turned it upward. The gesture was quiet, so was the forgiveness within it. 1 year later, 2 agendas rested side by side in the map room. One was written in Alistair's hand. The other was written in Rosamund's. The silver bell remained behind glass. Its ivory clapper lay in the open walnut box between them. Mr. Vane entered with a petition concerning grazing near St. Anne's. "Where shall we begin?" Alistair asked. Rosamund opened her agenda, with Mrs. Pike's account. He nodded and waited until she finished. When the estate books was signed, 2 names appeared at the bottom in separate hands, equal in size, with neither written over the other.